Hello? Okay, there you go. So my question is, how can we easily decide as consumers or as just individuals which businesses are conscious businesses so that we can make a choice in buying this product or that?
Where's our friend from Mindful Market here? And Earth Hero, I think, yeah, there are. I don't know much about Earth Hero. I need to learn about that. I think there are some, I know there are some apps available that you can look at, scan the barcodes and learn about where those products are made and so forth. But I think we really need something like what these gentlemen are putting together. I mean, you could go to firmsofendearment.com and see a list of 72 companies, etc. But that's kind of unwieldy. I think having entities like yours, intermediaries that make it easier for customers, and actually, ultimately it's all stakeholders. I mean, as an employee, as an investor, as a community member, as a customer, do you want, I mean, these are all different hats we wear, but ultimately we're just having a relationship with a company, and we want to do that in a way that's mindful and conscious and looking at the net impact. Because it could be a great thing for the customer, but they could be a terrible place to work, potentially. So you don't want to, be involved with those companies. So do you have any other?
Yeah, my comment on that would be, in addition to firms of endearment, the just capital. I mean, this would be for larger companies, and it's through different market sectors. But again, they are looking at organizations that have a completely different organizing principle in terms of how they come to market. And the name Just Capital are they a just company? Are they just in an environmental perspective? Are they just in a social perspective? Are they just in a fair wage perspective? Are they just, I mean, there's a whole selection of parameters. So that would be one thing. The second, it is about relationship, and it's at a local level. And I hear in part the question is at a personal level, how do I do this? I walk into an organization, I walk into a business, I walk into a shop. What does it feel like in there? I mean, and I don't mean aesthetically, although that certainly is part of it, but what does it feel like? There's an energy. There's a Sanskrit word, rasa. It's the thisness of something. And that thisness comes through. Yeah. In Latin, it's called hyacity. You're a man, I'm a man, but there's a thisness about you that makes you unique. And I will resonate with that thisness if there's a harmony there. So, I'll pay attention to that when I walk in. Is there a resonance that invites me back? And it's not just because I got good service. There's something much, much deeper than that.
Another great resource is the B Corp community. I don't know how many people here know about it, but there's a nonprofit called B Lab, and they've come up with this incredible assessment and certification. And so to be a certified B Corp, you have to take this assessment and get over an 80 out of 160 on this test that looks at everything from your governance to your supply chain, to how you treat your workers, to your purpose in the world. I think there's over 2,500 certified B Corps out there, and you can look for them. It's a B, capital letter B with a circle around it. We're a B Corp certified, and so look for certified B Corps as well. They're a great resource.
How do you see the role of business as it interacts with our current political climate, and how do you feel that business can be a healing force in the political arena?
Well, I think business needs to step up into more of a leadership role. The phrase that we use is we need to wake up, we need to grow up, and we need to show up. Because business is the largest actor of the three legs of society, which is government, nonprofits, or civil society, and business. And in free societies, typically business is the largest. In the US, about 80% of all dollars flow through the business world. And I think in the past, businesses have either been passive or they have been narrowly self-interested in how they interface with the government. So the US Chamber of Commerce, to me, has really been a negative force in that sense, because all they care about is what's good for business, right? As opposed to what's good for society and how can business be a part of that. So I think we need to play a more active role. I've seen that recently in Detroit, where I was interviewing the head of the local utility there, the DTE it's called. And it's a great turnaround story of a CEO who came in and took that company from the bottom on customers, employees, investors, environment, everything. And now they're at the top. So it's a wonderful turnaround story. But at some point they said, if we're doing okay as a company, but the Detroit region is going through a devastating downturn, starting 10 years ago. So they then turned their focus outward into the community. They fixed the inside community, and then they turned to the outer community. And not only them as a company, but now he has taken the lead to create a council of CEOs. And I think there's 17 of them now. All of the leading companies in the area, General Motors, Ford, Intuit, this company, and a bunch of others. So all the CEOs are now personally involved and committed, and they're taking the lead in saying, how can we figure out what's needed in this community, whether it's education or job training or access to transportation so people can get to work, etc. They've got a list of 10 or 12 things, and each of those companies is taking the lead on one of them and having a dramatic impact. And the governments are participating, but not as the leaders. So the mayor shows up to the meetings, but it's really the business community that's driving it. And I think that sense of ownership and rootedness in a place. See, too many businesses are willing to pick up and leave and go somewhere where the wages are lower and somebody's offering them a tax break. I think there has to be a sense of rootedness and a sense of place and an obligation to that place. Because, like some of these companies that Bob Chapman has founded, it has acquired, 650 people work at this company, and there are only 1,400 that live in that town. So if this company dies, that town dies. So it's not just about where can I get a slightly better deal. It's saying this town will not exist. It'll be wiped off the map. So I think that consciousness is what's needed. And I think I'm heartened by examples like what I just talked about. I think business people are stepping up. We have seen them in this political climate stand up for what is right and become forces of good. And I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, our experience as an organization was the day after the election, not to get too political, but we all showed up, and in our morning meeting, my entire team was crying. And we have a platform. We have Conscious Company Magazine, which you guys all have in your gift bag, but we have this platform that goes out to thousands of people around the world where business leaders are listening to us. So we completely scrapped the first half of our editorial calendar of 2017 and dedicated it all to what can business leaders do. So not to be entirely too self-promotional here, but we have 2 issues of the magazine in 2017 that are completely dedicated to advocacy and what people can do. And so we talked to Rose Macario, the CEO of Patagonia, who said, if you don't stand for something, you don't stand for anything. And when you stand for something, your customer base will follow. And that was where we started taking examples of business leaders all over the United States. So we also created this is all at consciouscompanymedia.com. You can get both of those back issues of the magazine. There's one with Rose on the cover, and then there's another one that has on the cover, it says, fear less, blank more. And we surveyed a whole bunch of business leaders around the world around, instead of just being terrified right now, what should we do? So there's a lot of solutions-based thinking within that. There's also the American Sustainable Business Council, asbc.org. We created a kind of advocacy toolkit that lives on our website and also lives on their website as well, as like, as a business leader, what can you actually start doing within your own community or on a national level? So ASBC is a great resource for getting involved.
So I am a producer at a company called Sounds True. And the day after the elections, there were a lot of people also crying. And so what the CEO did was invited everyone to come and sit in silent meditation. And there was lots of weeping, lots of fear and despair. And my feeling was, what is going on? It's Wednesday. Because a lot of people's experience that of people who have been so-called marginalized have been facing oppression and racism and sexism and homophobia and all the social ills on a daily basis. So your Constitution has got to get together in a way that you can show up in the world and not be blown over by someone who is not doing this on his own. He has a whole lot of, again, helping hands and conditions that have put him in office and that have supported a lot of these policies. So it's not just one man, and I hope we don't lose sight of that. The other piece of this, too, is that I started a small women's group in Denver, again, because of the desire to see myself reflected in the eyes of sisters and everything. And one thing that we do is reach out to businesses to say, hey, we've got a lot of work to do, and we want to know how you can help support us. We want to go to the mountains. We want to go and get our adventure on. We want to go and create healing experiences for and with each other. And in the process of doing that, we want to build a relationship with you, local company, because we not only want you to talk about being the change in the world, but we demand that you be about it too and put your resources where your language is. So I think it's very important for us, again, to look at what's going on with ourselves and shore up any points within us that begin to crumble when we feel that the world at large is too overwhelming, because there have been lots of people before us who have weathered far worse. And I think with movements like these and companies that are endeavoring to be increasingly conscious, we have that much more power and strength to actually see the results that we want.
I think just a real quick historical perspective would be useful here. In 1759, Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, wrote a book that preceded it called The Theory of Moral Sentiment. And the theory of moral sentiment informed what came to be known out of The Wealth of Nations as the invisible hands. And the invisible hands concept was about enlightened self-interest. It acknowledged that businesses and trading organizations would have self-interest, and that's not going to be the case. It's just going to be there. But the caveat there was that it was enlightened self-interest. It took into account the whole. Then you fast forward, Ayn Rand comes on the scene, and Keynesian economics comes up, and enlightened self-interest was transformed into rational self-interest. And that is a fundamental shift. Rational self-interest begets selfishness. And so, from a political perspective, the whole notion of how business can begin to impact, I think, generatively and holistically, and from the standpoint of health, the acronym, or HEAL, the acronym of HEAL, is to go back to the founding tenets of capitalism, which were rooted in enlightened self-interest. Our actions have to be considered holistically. They have to be considered, in light of connection. And just what serves my business well may not be the best decision for us to make from a political perspective. And a lot of our business laws is a consequence of that. I won't get on a soapbox around this. But I think the simple answer, and it is a simple answer to a very complex question, is go back to our roots, our founding roots. Enlightened self-interest, which informs and enforces a consideration of the whole, not just the parochial, rational self-interest.
Since we're going on the historical side, I just want to add one more footnote to that, which I think I agree with completely. I like to say Adam Smith was the mother and the father of capitalism, because the mother energy was in the theory of moral sentiments, the human need to care, right, which goes beyond self-interest. But then if you look at the founding of this country, and the founding fathers were inspired by Adam Smith, but they also then, when they were creating the system of government, looked to various models around the world, including the Iroquois Federation here in the US, which had been created after the Europeans started invading. And these warring tribes came together to form a confederation, and over time evolved a pretty sophisticated and highly effective system of governments, so that people had rights and there was peace and progress and so forth. And they looked at various things that they could borrow from that into the US system, and they did. But there was one critical element that they did not borrow, and that was that there was a council of women elders in the Iroquois Confederation, which actually selected the leader. So the leader was always a man, but always selected by a council of grandmothers, I think, elder women, right? And that brought in the feminine perspective and the long-term and the inclusive and all the other things. Not only did they reject any aspect of that idea, but as you know, women did not get the right to vote for another 140 years. So this country was built on masculine energy alone, right? And that becomes hyper-masculine. So you go from self-interest and freedom and achievement and so forth towards selfishness, greed, exploitation. And capitalism evolved alongside the political system, which was hyper-masculine. The business system became hyper-masculine, led to all of those things, which then led to militant unions, which then led to socialism, communism, Marxism. All of those things never existed before the abuses of unconscious or lower consciousness capitalism, right? So in order to reverse that, we need to shift and bring those energies back into capitalism. And then a lot of these political problems start to go away because the political divide, a lot of it is economic. People don't trust government or they don't trust business. Well, if you do business in this way, there's no reason why people on the left wouldn't love it, right? And there's no it's all rooted in freedom, and so people on the right would also resonate with it. So that's what I wanted to add.
My question is, in a conscious-based business model, how does one set a conscience-based profit margin?
That is probably the $64,000 question if I'm going to date myself with that analogy. When I talked about a business with a mission or a mission with a business, it actually, I think, comes down to it's about 51% mission, 49% business. I have to make a profit. I have to make a profit. I think part of the question gets rooted in, there's three fundamental paradigms that are in play. Not enough, just enough, more than enough. And if I can reconcile my profit incentives through that lens, if we don't have enough, we need to do something about it. And it's in the organizing principle is one of scarcity at that point, and it's a contractive energy. If I have just enough, the weight is off my shoulders just a bit here, but I am also pretty cautious and pretty parsimonious with just how I'm allocating resources. If I have more than enough, that opens up some very interesting ideas around creativity, innovation, generosity, giving, and there's a dynamic that comes into play here. And part of this has to do, if we start taking a look at Maslow's hierarchy, there's a point where we get the basic needs handled. And this is true for a business. We get the basic needs handled. And then it becomes a question of how much is enough. And that's predicated on not only the mission and the vision of the organization, but the strategic, the strategies that we've decided on. The strategies cost money to execute on. So we start taking a look at that. And I think also just keeping in mind, how do we keep the mission in front and not lose that in the mix? Because the tendency in this culture is to worship the God of profit. And Milton Friedman, may his soul rest in peace. The purpose of business is not to make a profit. It really isn't. Profit is necessary, but it's the secondary purpose.
I do have a thought on that. So profit is a social good. I do want to emphasize that point. It is socially irresponsible not to be profitable because those resources could be used in another way and generate a surplus, because without profits, we don't have taxes. Without taxes, we don't have infrastructure, we don't have public education, we don't have all the other things that we need collectively as a society. So profits are essential, and conscious companies tend to be very profitable because they create extraordinary amounts of value, right? But it matters how you make the money. Because you can make profit by squeezing your employees, squeezing your suppliers, externalizing burdens onto society and to future generations and destroying the environment. Or you can make profits alongside making many other kinds of wealth. Because businesses create, but they also destroy. At least 8 kinds of wealth: financial, and intellectual capital, social capital, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, ecological well-being, the impact on the culture, and the impact on our bodies. And a conscious company tries to have a positive impact in all these areas, including profits, financial profits. And traditional businesses will say, well, we're all about making money, and everything else that happens is a side effect. And unfortunately, side effects tend to be negative. But the reality is there's no such thing on this planet called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. And just because you call it a side effect doesn't make it less significant. It could be the most important aspect of your business in terms of its overall impact.
Hello. When working with mainstream businesses, how do you articulate or explain the idea of consciousness? Because I've tried to introduce that concept. I was working with a nonprofit to help them articulate their message to engage corporate sponsorship. And we had a really hard time breaking it down in a way that mainstream business would understand. Could you maybe articulate that a little?
Well, so one is, this idea of purpose, asking questions like, why do you exist? Why do you need to exist? Why would you be missed if you disappeared tomorrow? Right? I mean, there's lots of banks and there's lots of any kind of business. There's plenty of them. So what are you doing that's unique? Right? So that's at one level. And another level also is in terms of the leader's own consciousness. It's very hard if a leader is operating at a certain level of consciousness for the business to operate anything above that. In fact, I would say it's impossible. So the leader's level of consciousness really sets the upper limit. And so in a company where the leader is operating at a low level of consciousness, it's very hard to get through. Now, one way in which it sometimes does happen is they turn to chapter 6 with the financial results, and they say, wow, these companies outperform. So in that case, we want to do it. And I say to them, if you're only doing it for that reason, it probably won't work. Because you have to do the right things for the right reasons. And these 4 pillars of conscious capitalism, higher purpose, stakeholder integration, conscious leadership, and caring cultures. I said these are tenets, they're not tactics. These are pillars of fundamental belief. You have to believe that these are the right things to do, that taking care of all your stakeholders is the right thing to do. Not only because it's going to ultimately result in more profits, because people will see through that. My friend Fred Kaufman has a new book out in which he uses this analogy. It's like, let's say you're asking somebody to marry you, and you get down on your knees and say, would you marry me? And she says, why do you want to marry me? He said, well, I've read that married people live 5 years longer and they earn 30% more over their lifetime. So if you say that's the reason why we want to become a conscious company, then it's not going to work. You have to do it for the right reason. So the consciousness of the leader has to be there.
I would add to that, the company that I work for, every year we have not only an outlook of where the company is headed financially, but there's also another bottom line that we are working toward, and that is the satisfaction, the happiness, and growth of each employee. And so we have all company meetings where we are held accountable to our intentions at the start of the year. So there's always a level of messiness that kind of comes into that picture, because not only are we a company that is spirituality based, but we're also endeavoring to make money in the process, right? But the other thing too is that it's very important to not only show up in the world with a sincere and heart-based focus to make the changes that are needed in the world, but to also hold every employee accountable for contributing to what that mission is. And it's quite a soup mix when everybody is bringing all of their issues and their change and their triggers into a space, trying to align to that mission. So it's more than a notion to just talk about consciousness, but it's really something to try and work aligned to those parallel bottom lines. But it's certainly worthy work.
One real quick thing in the 3 minutes that we had left. Take as much time as we need in the next 3 minutes. That's it. Yeah, okay. Consciousness, there's a corollary that that you might find useful here, is just awareness. An increase in awareness increases choice-making capacity. So if I want to have or invite a business leader to become more conscious, I might use the word, I invite you to become more aware, because you're going to see things that you haven't seen before. And then the question is, if you see things that you haven't seen before, what does that make possible? and it kind of takes it out of the realm of woo, yeah, because the word consciousness gets a little pejorative sometimes in people's thinking. It's kind of, oh, that's that, that's squishy. you're from Boulder, sort of a thing. So awareness, I mean, awareness is pretty pragmatic, yeah, and just kind of work it from there.